Hi, and welcome to Relief Beyond Belief, exploring the world of natural healing. I'm your host, Alexandra Barker. Today we're going to be talking about feet. Now, did you know that over the course of a lifetime, you can expect to walk over about 100,000 miles? That's the equivalent of circling the earth 4 times. And that's a lot of pounding on the over 7,000 nerve endings found in our feet. So, which brings us directly to the topic of the day. We're going to be discussing reflexology, and with me today is reflexologist Melissa Mitchell. Hello.
Hi,
welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you.
So with all those many nerve endings, and I know the reflexology is a matter of tapping into that to treat our entire body. So
it is.
Would you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Okay.
It's a little more than just a foot massage, isn't it?
Absolutely. A little more in-depth than just sort of working the surface of the feet. Reflexology is a natural healing art. It's been around for thousands of years. In fact, our first written documentation of it is found on the Egyptian hieroglyphs, so we know that it's at least 5,000 years old.
Wow.
It's also interesting that every indigenous population in the world uses some form of foot manipulation, and that still exists today. So that's quite an interesting thing about reflexology. What it is it's a healing art that's based on using the reflexes found in the feet to tap into those more than 7,000 nerve endings that you were just talking about. And what it does is 3 key things for the body. It, first and foremost, is wonderful for relaxation. And how it works that way is it induces the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and repair mode. Most of us today function fully in our sympathetic, which is our fight or flight mode.
Oh, yes.
You know, because everybody's hurry, hurry, hurry.
Yeah.
We have so much to do, so little time, all the rest of that. We try to cram too much into our days. So our bodies get used to functioning in overdrive all the time. And that's not good for us because it's when our bodies are in the rest and repair mode that we can do our own healing work and our own repair work.
Right.
So reflexology induces that parasympathetic nervous system to allow the body to start that process of healing what it can and repairing what it can itself. So that's one key benefit we get from reflexology. Secondly, it increases circulation throughout the entire body. So it's very useful for things that have poor circulation, whether that's a cardiac condition, headaches, those sorts of things. Reflexology is very useful for helping the body cope with those sorts of things. The third thing that it does is it helps bring the body back into homeostasis. And that's really just a fancy word for balance. It helps to keep the body back into balance. And it's interesting because, again, in today's very busy society, what we see is people sort of slide a little bit off balance, and that becomes the new normal. They get used to functioning a little bit off balance. Well, then something else will happen and they'll slide a little bit more off balance. That becomes the new normal and they get used to it. And before long, they're functioning so far off of what their body should be functioning, and they're not even aware that that's what has happened. So those are the 3 really big benefits that one gains from having regular reflexology treatments.
And when you say regular, once a month?
Yeah, if you're looking to do some maintenance work for yourself or just to sort of keep everything flowing the way it's supposed to, once a month would be what I would recommend to people. You know, if people are looking for you know, some relief from a more acute or a chronic health problem, depending on what those parameters were, we would look at a different schedule of treatment.
Because many things can be treated through reflexology.
Yes, they can. We don't treat for specific conditions.
So you're treating the person as a whole and the
right.
condition
Anytime somebody would go for a reflexology session, it is always a complete session. We're not going to hone in. You know, you could come to me and say, gee, I've got really bad asthma, you know, and I'm really in a bad way right now. I'm not going to just treat the respiratory system. I'm going to treat the entire body, because if you only isolate one issue, you've now removed the balance that existed in that body. So it is very much a treating the whole person.
So for treatment, I imagine you would take have someone fill out a health form, and then how would a treatment proceed from that? How much time should someone allow for this?
With me, for a first treatment, you would be looking at about an hour and a half because I need to collect a fairly detailed health history from you and then discuss that with you, and then plan a treatment course based on what the findings of that health history would be. From there on, I use a nice zero gravity chair. Some reflexologists will use a massage table and just sort of buoy you up with lots of pillows. I prefer the chair, number one, because it's portable, and I do, take it around with me at times. I also really like it because it's almost akin to being in a hammock without the movement, so it takes the stress out of your back, which I find a lot of people today carry a lot of stress in their backs. So the chair works really well for that. We would remove your socks and shoes so that we can bare the feet. Treatment would consist of cleaning the feet before we start. I do an inspection of the feet just to see what other clues there are on the surface of the feet for me, and then the treatment itself takes about an hour from start to finish. We start with the right foot always, and that's mostly because of the way the body is mapped on the feet and the way that our digestive system works basically from right to left. So that's the progression with the feet.
Now, speaking of a nice segue into when you mentioned about how the body is mapped, because you brought with you a map of the foot. And we'll get a close-up of that, and we can discuss a little bit more in depth how that affects the treatment and everything else.
Basically, we work, as I said, from right to left. We basically work from the top of the body down to the bottom of the body. So this particular diagram comes from the Reflexology Association of Canada, which is who I'm certified through. And depending on where a reflexologist is certified, you may see slight variations in this kind of a map. What you'll see, though, is at the top here along the tips of the toes, this all starts in the head area. So we go through the brain and the sinuses, the eyes, the ears, the teeth area, through into the neck and shoulder area, down, through the abdomen area. So we've got, the heart, the lungs, the shoulder, moving down into the abdominal cavity, where we would have all the internal organs, through the digestive system, which is all your intestines and what have you, into the pelvic area. So that basically is the same on both feet, allowing, of course, for the differences with the liver and the spleen and, your pancreas and that sort of thing. Moving on to the dorsal side, the top side of the foot, we have the chest, breast, lung area here, and some of the lymph zones. This one would be the one that you would find down more in the groin area. Up along the toe would be more what you'd find up in the armpit area, the depots of the lymph. Again, looking from the side view, you have basically the same thing that you're seeing top and bottom, with a few extra things. Interestingly enough, people don't always realize that when they get pains in their feet, it's indicative of something else going on in the body. It's the body's means of standing up and saying, yoo-hoo, there's a little problem here and I need some attention. We generally would attribute that to, oh, I've got a new pair of shoes on and they're pinching my feet, or oh, I stepped on something and I knocked something slightly out of whack in my foot. We would attribute it to external factors first before we would attribute it to internal factors. It's also quite interesting that you can ask somebody to fill in a paper health history form, and most people will be reasonably forthcoming with that. Then you work on the feet, and you will often find that there are other issues that crop up, and when you query somebody about, oh gee, has this ever been an issue, or do you find that you have this going on with you, they'll go, yeah, I do. How did you know that? And it's just the information that you get from the feet.
So you could treat headaches, say, just by working those acupressure points located in the big toe and the tops of the toes and that sort of thing. So that's something that somebody, I imagine, in between treatments, if somebody had like a chronic headache condition or something, you could probably show them ways that they could do that in between sessions with you.
Absolutely. Reflexology isn't confined just to the feet. I work predominantly on feet because I'm a fairly newly certified reflexologist. And the progression that you will see is learning the feet first. The reason we learn the feet first is, again, because of all the nerve endings. There's more than 7,000 nerve endings in the feet that connect us to the rest of our bodies. You can also work on the hands. I always prefer to work on people's feet, and the reason for that is our feet are a lot more sensitive. You know, they're mostly encased in shoes. They're not exposed to the temperature changes that our hands are. They're not used the way our hands are used. Our hands become desensitized over time, you know, just because we use them so much. You will still get a decent treatment, and interestingly enough, anytime I give a treatment, I get a treatment through my own hands.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you do. You don't get a full treatment because you're not specifically stimulating the points in your hand, but just the act of using your hands does stimulate things in your body. Just to illustrate that a little bit further, you'll see people who are very nervous. You know,
oh, yeah.
wringing their hands.
Oh, so subconsciously they're trying to calm themselves.
Exactly.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Exactly. You know, one of the key points for that would be the solar plexus. Whenever people get stressed out, the first thing everything does is tighten up, makes it hard to breathe.
Oh.
Makes it hard to draw nice deep breaths.
So where exactly that would be like?
That point is located sort of directly below your middle fingers there, and if you feel, you have to push a little bit. It's generally somewhere around those first lines in your fingers, but you can actually feel a little depression
Oh, yeah.
in there, and you should get a little zing when you hit the right spot. I generally find coming from the top, from the fingers, works the best, and using your thumb and just dig it in and up, you'll get a little whoop, but you can feel.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and so you can stimulate that if you're feeling a little bit anxious or a little bit stressed. That will help to calm the body down. Do it on both hands, though. Don't just do it on one to maintain the balance. You know, people who do suffer with lots of headaches can stimulate their brain circulation and their brain points just by pulling through on the ends of their fingers. And again, it requires a little bit of strength to, you know, apply enough pressure to do that.
And would you hold that like 10 to 30 seconds?
No,
like, as
I generally recommend to people that they sort of start at their bottom knuckle and just sort of pull out on the finger and pull right down over the top of the finger.
Oh.
And what that does is it hits both the sinus points, which would be in the pads of the fingers,
Yeah.
and the brain points, which would be located on the very tips of the hands.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I'll have to remember that one.
yeah,
I know another good one for headaches is the web between your index finger and your thumb.
yes.
So that's more of an acupressure point, but I imagine it would still come into play with the
Well,
reflexology.
it is, and interestingly enough, part of that is because the base around the thumb here would be the neck. And again, when we have chronic pain, like chronic headaches, we tend to see people hunching their shoulders, or they hold their head at an odd angle to try and relieve some of that pressure.
Oh.
Right.
If you're in a stressful situation, or if you have a headache, just some using hand reflexology points that you can use. Wondered if you have any. And you were explaining, actually, just in case anybody missed, you were just explaining toward the end how by using this acupressure point, because the thumb is the neck, and how that we often hold tension in our shoulders and neck area.
Right, we do. To find that point, if you hold your hand out quite taut and you feel in there, you can actually feel the beginning of the muscle area in there. And that point is right in on the edge of that muscle. And you can do it from either side, or pinch with the forefinger and the thumb together. That will go a long way to relieving some of the pressure, you know, with a headache building. Or, you know, if you just start to feel that, ooh, I'm a little stressed out, you know, sitting in traffic, or, you know, something like that. Interestingly enough, people who spend a lot of time walking barefoot tend not to have the same kinds of health issues as people who wear shoes all the time. And part of that is because when you walk barefoot, you are connected to the Earth's energy and the Earth's magnetic field. And just walking over uneven ground, whether that's, you know, your grass outside or you're walking on a sandy beach, a pebbly driveway, it does stimulate some of the points in the feet. And there's been some really interesting studies done over the years that have correlated populations beginning to wear shoes with the development of disease processes, which I find quite fascinating.
It is. So really, even come the warmer weather, it's a good idea then just to really just go barefoot whenever possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, there are other health issues that are going to prevent that, back issues or that sort of thing. Another interesting thing about reflexology is it's good for everybody, from very small babies right through to the very elderly.
You would just gauge your pressure that you would use differently.
Absolutely. Reflexology shouldn't, result in you in a puddle of tears. It's not painful. And the pressure used is always geared to the client. So it functions very much on their tolerance threshold, not my tolerance threshold.
And that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that would vary a lot.
Absolutely. It does vary a lot.
I have very low threshold. I don't like pain.
There are a lot of people who would say that about themselves, and yet when you actually begin working on them, they're quite surprised at the amount of pressure that they are able to take before they start going, oh, I'm not really happy with that.
This isn't fun anymore.
Right. And of course for children who have a little bit more difficulty sitting still for a longer period of time, we would look at a shorter session. For somebody who was ill, very, very ill or acutely ill, again, we would look at a shorter session for them so that they're not having to sit for the length of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, if you do come across an area that does seem to be very sensitive to somebody, now that would indicate to you that there's some sort of disorder in the associated parts, say you're on the spleen or the liver.
Yeah, not necessarily a disorder.
A blockage of some kind.
Yeah, maybe an energy blockage.
Yeah. That's the other area I wanted to get into with you too.
Yeah, certainly, either an energy blockage or in some cases it will be scar tissue from prior surgeries that will show up.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I remember working on a lady not too long ago, and when I hit the gallbladder point, she said, ow, that's kind of tender. And I said to her, oh, have you had some gallbladder issues? And she said, no, didn't I write that down on the health history form? I had that out years ago. I said, well, it's probably just some scar tissue, that you've got. And she said, well, actually, I have a lot of scar tissue around that surgery. So it's quite interesting what shows up.
Wow. So then you would just sort of work in the perimeter or just be a little more gentle until you get a bit of a tolerance to it?
Yeah, a little more gentle. Interestingly enough, sometimes when you work a point like that, it will actually help the body to break down some of the scar tissue around the original site. And again, that goes back to the energy that we were just touching on.
Yeah. So after treatment then, I know with other forms of energy work, people can often experience things like nausea, mood swings, their tiredness, different physical effects that are related just because you've been moving energy and removing blockages, energy blockages in the body. So reflexology would say the same?
Yes, absolutely. I tend to gear my sessions to, as I said, the individual client because I want to minimize as best I can some of those things from happening to them. Not everybody has time to be nauseous in the day or not feeling so well or whatever.
I think for the most part people just feel wonderful.
Absolutely. I see generally one of two things. People always, when I'm done with a session, say, oh, can I just sit in this chair for like the rest of the day? I really don't want to get out of it. We see a lot of people who get out of the chair and they're very, very relaxed, but feeling very energized, like they just feel like they're on top of a mountain. And then I often see people, particularly clients who like to be seen in the later part of the day or into the early evening, they get so relaxed that they literally sort of, roll themselves out of the chair. They go home and have a nice hot Epsom salt bath to draw some of the toxins out and dive right into bed. And I often get calls the next day saying, wow, I can't believe I slept so well last night. So, I sort of see both ends of the spectrum, if you will. which is interesting. But yes, you would see one of the things that we do see with reflexology is releasing toxins through the body.
And that's a big one.
It is.
That's a major benefit.
It is, particularly in our world today where we're exposed to so much in the way of toxins. You know, people store toxins, and the human body stores toxins in fat tissue, which, you know, is a bit dangerous because one of the biggest areas of fat in the body is in the brain.
Oh.
Because all of our brain cells are coated with a myelin sheath, and the biggest component of that myelin is fat.
What would you say that's the greatest benefit then of reflexology? Is the detoxification? Or what would you say it is?
You know, I certainly think that it would be sort of a multifaceted benefit. Certainly, you know, the detoxification is wonderful. Inducing that parasympathetic nervous system into that rest and repair mode, for people to just step back and de-stress, very critical. People don't realize how damaging stress is.
Yeah, they're just really starting to study that now in the scientific world and realize just really how damaging it is. It is. It's seriously damaging. We really have to put the brakes on the stress. And
Absolutely.
More we can do. Yeah.
You know, and people think, well, it's just mental that we feel the stress, and that's absolutely not my experience at all. You know, we do see physical breakdown that is a direct manifestation of stress in people's lives. Chronic illness is at an all-time high. Here in North America, we spend more money per person on health care than anywhere else in the world, and yet we are the sickest population of people on the earth.
And so much is preventable. That's the
absolutely
the message to get out there. Certainly, why I do this show and and the magazine and the book is just to really get that out there, that people have so much control over. They just have to realizing that, and even realizing that they do have control is so empowering.
Absolutely. You know, sitting back and waiting for somebody else to take care of your body once it's broken down is certainly not, you know, the best case scenario. Being proactive in maintaining your health and well-being goes a lot further, you know, to maintaining your health in the long term.
What drew you originally to reflexology?
Well, interestingly enough, people who know me really well would say I've always had a foot fetish from the time I was a child. I can see somebody's feet once and recognize them thereafter by their feet.
Really?
Yeah, and I've been like that since I was a child. Hands are the same way. I can recognize people by their hands. You know, I had a session, and it was so powerful. I just said, I have to do this. It's something that just made me want to go forward with working with natural health for people. And it's a really good marriage with the nutritional consulting that I also do.
Yeah, so I was going to make sure that we got a mention of that in there. Right. And we put your information up so people can contact you regarding either. And you also, you have the Nature Sunshine. You also, if people are looking for that sort of thing, you can also help them in that area as well.
Absolutely. Good quality essential oils. If people are looking for some aromatherapy oils, also have access to those. So
you don't use those with the treatment?
I do at times.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do at times.
It's not just skin against skin, you actually use the oils?
You use skin against skin for the treatment. I generally like to finish up with some form of just light massage.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so I'll often use either a carrier oil with an essential oil, depending on whatever that person's issues are, or I'll use a nice finishing emollient cream, you know, to help out with dryness or other issues that people are dealing with. It really, it's very client-driven, so whatever the client's needs are, that's where I focus.
Well, that's really good. Very interesting. And I know that it's extensive training that goes along with this, so it's
through the Reflexology Association of Canada, they're working really hard to try and bring everybody onto the same playing field, so that there is a consistent standard of practice, that there's a consistent application of ethics and confidentiality and all of those sorts of things.
That's very important too.
It is important, and it's important for people to know, that they have the right to ask when they're seeing a practitioner. where are you certified
Yes,
through?
and they should be comfortable in doing that. It's really important they
Absolutely.
feel comfortable with you, particularly with natural health practitioners, I think.
Absolutely. So the Reflexology Association, we call it RAC for short. RAC has a classroom component to their training. There's a home study component to the training, and then you have your therapies that you have to go through, your case studies. There's a written exam and a practical exam. And if anybody's interested